I'm going to talk, I'm going to share my experience of teaching about immigration in America. And I'm sure this is an important topic for all over the country. And I will give you a couple of perspective and reason how I teach that particular topic. Okay, why talk about immigration? That's one of the first things that I wanted to clarify to all of you. There are several reasons why we need to talk about immigration, at least in America. Hopefully you can read that. My student worker prepared that for me, so I couldn't make it any bigger than what she has. One of the things that why it is important to talk about immigration, not just, I'm going to give you from the context of America, but I'm sure that this affects every corner of the world in these days, because migration is a part of experience in today's environment. Because as we see, because of the war conflict, because of the civil war, because of the catastrophic disaster, people are constantly moving from one place to the other. So it's a human experience in that sense. Also, immigration is the existential reality in all countries of the world these days. Every country faces that particular idea of migration. People are constantly moving. Also, because of that immigration, people are moving to different places. It results in a globalized, diverse, multicultural world. And that's what my opening speech was, because to show you that why globalization is important. Global citizen is important because people are constantly migrating and moving to different places and creating that place more diverse than what it was initially. Also, this will, if you talk about immigration in your particular place, what it creates among your students is that finally they acknowledge the existence and importance of diversity and creates an empathy. That's what I was talking about, empathy among the citizens of that. So that's why we need to talk about it. Now, another interesting thing that why we talk also, because immigration is a dynamic process. It's constantly happening. From American context, if you're all familiar, I'm sure all of you, wherever you studied, one thing we learned when I grew up in my initial native country where I immigrated to United States was we always learned America is a land of immigrants, right? We all learned that in our school. And usually, why it's a dynamic process? Because many people, I'll come to that, but many of my students think, oh, Ellis Island in late 1800s when immigrants, many people from Europe went to America and went through the Ellis Island, and that's after the Ellis Island was closed, immigration is closed. There's no other immigration is happening, but it's still going. So that's what's another reason it's a dynamic. If we talked about even if you think about the European context, since the creation of European Union in 1993, citizens of the Union have been migrating among different countries because of the economic as well as educational result. European country, the creation of that union created the people's movement of different countries, right? They don't need any more visa. They can constantly move either for job or for education. So it's a dynamic process in that as well. Therefore, since 1993, Europe has also become a land of immigrants, right? Not just America, Europe has become like that as well. First, within the Union, because they were moving constantly for economic reason or for educational opportunity. But at the same time, especially in 2015, and the reason I picked that particular year, if I remember, and all of you probably remember, that in 2015, there's a huge influx of migrants were coming from Syria, that Middle East and Africa, coming through the Greece, going up to the north, settling in a huge migration happened in Germany and other parts of the Europe as well. So you can see that migration is a dynamic and still probably going. Immigration issue is not unique to Europe and America. I'm sure because of the conflict, civil war, and other places, the migration is happening within the particular region that people are constantly moving. So immigration and migration, all of these are interconnected, and it's constantly dynamic. So that's why it is important for you to address that in your particular school setting. Now, what is the relationship the immigration and curriculum? At least from the American point of view, immigration is required in a regular and curricular topic in all level, from elementary, middle school, which we call, there are 3 settings, as well as high school. It is required by the state standards. Almost every 50 states in their education curriculum standard says you have to talk about immigration. So that's what another reason, the connection between immigration in America. Unfortunately, not all teachers or school districts address this topic in the US classroom with certain emphasis. Remember, I talked to you in my opening speech that there is a certain segment of the population in the United States do not want to create that inclusion. The resistance is still going. So therefore, a lot of students do not talk about immigration, or teachers do not talk about immigration with emphasis in that. According to the European Commission, that's the American required that teacher is supposed to teach. But according to one report that I did some research on 2018, European educations are in the system are required to talk about immigration under the umbrella of intercultural education, including Italy is part of that. So if I'm wrong, correct me. In that intercultural education, it says that you should talk about immigrants, that people who are coming here and settling in European countries. So there is a connection between the topic of immigration and the curriculum, because it is required or emphasized to be taught. So that's why it is important to talk about immigration in the classroom. Now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my pedagogical address. How do I bring this immigration topic into my classroom? So what I do before I start directly talking about immigration, so in my class, I teach a particular course called multicultural education. All students in our program are required to take that class. So what I do in that particular class, I ask them to research about their cultural heritage, right? So that's one of the assignment. They have to create that assignment. So in order to do that project, what they do, students are required to undertake research about the roots of their ancestral's background, right? So they do that research, and then after that research, they do a presentation in the class about their background. Research helped them in that they found what they really try to find out, or ultimately they usually found, is that their great-grandparents migrated or immigrated experience. Oh, yes, I remember my grandfather talked about his great-grandfather or his grandparents came from Europe, different parts of the Europe, coming through the Ellis Island. They emphasize that. So, oh, I remember learning that from that. So yes, my ancestral background is from Italy or from Spain or for wherever the Europe is, right? Which part they came. So they do that presentation. So through that presentation, they realize that immigration is not an abstract topic, but a lived experience story, because they heard that from their grandparents. Oh, their parents came through that. So it becomes more living experience rather than historical event. So that's what's the interesting thing. So I do that project, and they do that project, and they present that in class. Remember, they did research and found out that their grandparents came through Ellis Island from different parts of the Europe. But what I do after this presentation, I do a little gap. I don't talk about immigration. I talk about other multicultural issues. And then a couple of weeks later, I come back. A few weeks later, after the cultural lesson, I ask students this question. I said, list 3 things that comes to your mind when you see the word immigration. I don't say that immediately. What I said, I'm going to show you a word on my screen. Don't think too much. The moment you see that word, list 3 things that comes to your mind immediately, right? I don't say that immigration immediately. I said, okay, are you ready? They said, oh, yes. Okay, then I flash that on my screen, the word immigrants. So they immediately write there. Almost every semester, I have been teaching this course for the last 22 years that I have been in this particular university. So these are some of the lists that they create in their list. Illegal, Mexican and Hispanic, border crossing at night, and taking our job. These are some of the things that almost 1 or 2 students will always write that, right? Immediately they will think about that, illegal. Now, after we generate this discussion, this topics of list of things, then I said, okay, let me see discussion about this. These are all negative perception, right? So I said, what makes you think about this list? Remember, a few weeks earlier, they said their grandparents all immigrated to America through Ellis Island from Europe, right? Now, when they see that immigrants, they don't think about their grandparents anymore. What they're thinking about, the current environment is the people coming through the southern border illegally. They're mostly they're coming Mexicans and Hispanics, all of those. So that's what there comes. And what is the reason? Is once I ask them, what is the reason you created that list? Okay, they said again, most of them admit the perception stems from what they have heard in the news media or their friends and family, right? I'm sure you're aware of American for the last couple of years, what's going on. So that will give you. So constantly news media is focusing on those. Oh, they're taking. Few students even will say, yeah, they're taking our job, right? So these are the stems that most of them cannot recall if teachers from elementary level, from kindergarten all the way to high school, the teacher ever talk about the topic of immigration. Remember, I told you earlier that immigration topic is required by teachers to teach, but not all teachers in every single community address that, right? So they don't learn anything about immigration. Even if they do learn, here is an interesting, a few exceptions with the Ellis Island from 1892 to 1954 when Ellis Island was closed. So they see that when they talk about their grandparents' experience of coming through the Ellis Island, oh, it's a history, long time ago. It's a historical event. Nothing is happening now. So whenever they think about immigration or immigrants, they think, oh, these are all illegal. Nobody is coming here legally these days, right? So that's what's the interesting thing about it. Now, then what I do is that, so okay, now it is my time to talk to them. Why? What are the immigration types in America currently? And I'm sure these 2 categories exist even almost every European country, I assume. One is the illegal and the other is the legal immigrants, right? There are 2 types of almost every country. I'm sure even in Italy, there are some immigrants who are here illegally. Somehow they came, maybe came legally, but didn't expand their paper and they stayed illegally. And then certainly some people came legally, just like the United States. Now, the question is, why do I address illegal immigrants first in my class before talking about legal immigrants? Because first I address why, because that is the most misconception they have about illegal immigrants, because they're taking our job, they're taking our services for free, and all of those. They're getting free financial aid, all kinds of things, that social safety nets, they're all using that, right, illegally. So therefore, also then we talk about the myths about illegal immigrants. Couple of things that talks about, many people say, oh, they're illegal. One of the myths is they don't pay taxes and they get all the benefits. Yes, they don't pay the federal income tax because they're not legal, they're not under the record. So therefore they don't, that's true. But they do pay taxes indirectly. They're buying things, they're paying sales tax, right? They're renting house, they're paying indirectly those property tax. Because when landlord said that rent, sure, the landlord is calculating the rent, whatever property tax they have to provide. So they're included, that indirectly they're paying that. Also, talk about illegal immigrants is myths about, because these are some of the myths they have about them. One of the biggest thing when we talk about illegal immigrants, and I'm sure this is true also in many parts of the Europe, yes, they do work, but they do work of the things that most of us are not going to willing to do the job. Working in the field, agricultural field. If you go to any parts of the United States, any farmer, you will ask them, they have employed illegal immigrants. Because first of all, the labor is cheap, plus those hardworking, many of us will not do those. So those kind of things that we talk about, the myths and the why it is important to understand, going back to the empathy situation, understanding the hard work they're putting it in that sense. And the contribution of the illegal immigrants they're making, because they are working in the field, producing the food that comes to my plate, right? If they didn't work there, those agricultural farmers could not produce the food that we are eating during the dinner time or lunchtime. So those hardworking people, they're contributing in that particular sense. Then I come and talk about legal immigrants, right? At least in American points, there are 4 ways that, and I'm sure some of them could be true also for American. Family sponsored. Now, I am an immigrant. I am a citizen now. If I want to sponsor somebody of my direct family, not cousins or aunts, I have a brother back home in my native country where I immigrated from. I'm originally immigrated from Bangladesh to the United States. I have a brother there, so I can sponsor him. So legally that can be done. Employer request. I'm sure this is true also in Europe, that many companies hire people from overseas to work in their company, right? So employer visa. And the refugee and asylum seekers, just like here in the Europe, the same thing is refugees. I'm sure you have the last year's withdrawal of American troops from Afghanistan created a huge asylum seeker and refugees that United States brought few of them to America, and in that sense. So those are some of the things, and then we talk about all of those. Now, then I talk about the citizenship. I'm going to go through this. The reason is all of those we talk about, but the reason I brought these process again, why? Because they also have to understand why sometimes people come illegally, even though some people, I'm legal, right? If I want to bring my family, it will take a long time process to do that paper. At least from the one example, I have a brother back home, back in Bangladesh. If I want to bring him to the United States legally, if I apply now, it will take 10 years to process that paper before any decision could be made, right? So they have to understand why sometimes people take that illegal process, because, you know, in many times a country could be in jeopardy in terms of civil war and all of those. So if they have to wait for 10 years to bring somebody legally, they may not be living there anymore. They could be dead because of the civil war and all of the conflict that's going on. So it is better for them to come sneak in. So students have to understand this process of this. Now, ultimately, what happened when I talk about through this process and talk about immigration, it creates a reflection on the students, express surprise and amazement. Oh, they didn't know that immigration is still going on, and these people are contributing in that process, right? And how long it takes, right? And also the process and the money that requires. Let me give you a simple example. When I applied for my immigration, I came as a student, then I went from my student status to the employment, and then to the citizenship, right? To get my green card, I'm sure all of you are familiar with that word green card in America, right? Before you become a citizen, you have to apply for a green card. For my green card alone, I spend about $6,500 to pay both lawyer fee and the immigration process fee and all of those. So they realize that how long it takes, how much money it takes for the people to immigrate. So they're surprised. They develop an appreciation that illegal immigrants, yes, they are illegally here, but they're contributing that. So they become more appreciative of their contribution in that sense. Develop an empathy, again, creates that understand. If they didn't create that, produce that food in the agricultural field, we couldn't have had those food in our plate, bro. So that's what I'm saying. Express dismay that they didn't learn about it in their school, because many teachers would, many of my students would say, thank you, Dr. Hossain, for telling us my teacher did not talk about immigration at all. So they become promised that determined that they will address this. So there are many processes, and I'm sure some of these process happens in European countries as well. So conclusion that realizing that immigration is essential to the economic stability of every country, that those illegal immigrants are contributing to that stability on the economics as well. Eliminating the conception, both legal are important, the social harmony. And the last, addressing clearly school immigrants among the young generation. So if I have a complete article that I wrote a couple of years ago. Again, if you want the full article of that, you can do that URL code, or you can go to this particular site. Sorry. Thank you. If you have any question,